Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand.
In our top story, Canada has severed diplomatic ties with Iran. In response to the Islamic Republic's failure to comply with UN resolutions pertaining to its nuclear program, Canada has closed its embassy in Tehran and recalled its diplomats. John Baird, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, announced the decision, saying that Iran is the most significant threat to global peace and security in the world today. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement saying the determination shown by Canada is very important in order for the Iranians to understand that they cannot continue with their race for nuclear weapons. This practical step must serve as an example of morality and responsibility to the international community.
7 civilians were injured when Palestinian terrorists fired 2 Grad rockets into southern Israel last week. Several buildings, including 2 houses, were badly damaged after being hit. One home completely collapsed while the owner was still inside. He survived and was treated for minor injuries. Residents of southern Israel collectively expressed relief that no one was badly injured, but that they have had enough of living in fear. School in southern Israel was canceled on Sunday for security reasons. Since the start of the academic year, there has been an escalation of terrorism in the south. Residents there say that the increase in attacks are meant to terrorize Israelis by threatening the security of their children.
High schools in the Hamas-run Gaza Strip have reintroduced the instruction of Hebrew for the first time in 20 years. According to a course description, the class, called Know Your Enemy, offers Hebrew instruction so that the young Palestinians can better understand the structure of Israeli society and ultimately be able to understand Israelis so that they can fight Israel more effectively. Mahmoud Matar, Director General of the Ministry of Education in the Gaza Strip, said, "We look at Israel as the enemy. We teach our students the language of the enemy."
Jews, Christians, and Muslims have joined together to defend the biblical rite of circumcision in Germany. The courts in Germany have recently outlawed the commandment, calling it a serious and irreversible interference with the human body. The German media likened circumcision to genital mutilation, and an official from the Berlin magistrate said the court has not allowed itself to be frightened by the fear of being criticized as anti-Semitic. Thomas Hellmann, Berlin's top justice official, said that the ruling was meant to protect Jewish children, but leaders of the Jewish community are saying that they are being portrayed as child torturers for observing this important biblical commandment. Former Israeli Chief Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau said that in his time, a Jewish child's life was meaningless to the Germans, and if this is the state of affairs in Germany, then Jews have no reason to stay there.
Syrian fighter planes bombed a civilian suburb of Aleppo, wounding hundreds and killing an unconfirmed number of people. Aleppo has been a hotbed of insurgent activity, and this strong show of force from Bashar al-Assad's crumbling regime is a desperate attempt to regain control of Syria's largest city. The local coordination committee said that at least 148 people were killed in this incident. The shelling apparently punctured a water pipeline into the city, which has left several neighborhoods without water entirely. One informant for the Syrian opposition said, "First the electricity was cut off, and now the water. This will only increase the suffering of the Syrian people."
Pastor Youssef Nadarkhani has finally been released from an Iranian prison after 3 years in jail. Nadarkhani was originally sentenced to death for refusing to renounce his Christian faith. Jordan Sekalo, executive director of the American Center for Law and Justice, said Pastor Youssef was acquitted of apostasy and released from prison. After languishing in an Iranian jail for almost 3 years, he has been reunited with his family. While we are working on confirming the exact details of his release, some sources report that the court alternatively convicted Pastor Youssef of evangelizing to Muslims, sentencing him to 3 years and granting him time served. Pastor Youssef's story is an example of how the world can join together to ensure that justice is served and freedom is preserved. The U.S. State Department worked with the ACLJ to campaign for the pastor's freedom. 3 million people joined the Twitter campaign for his release.
The Palestinian Authority is in the midst of the worst financial crisis in its history. Last week, Palestinian truck drivers blocked the main streets of Ramallah to protest high unemployment and exorbitant price hikes in the PA. At least 50 people were injured when the protest turned violent. Hundreds of activists took to the streets, burning tires and throwing rocks at PA police officers. The police responded by firing live ammunition and ultimately dispersed the crowds with tear gas. Last week, PA President Mahmoud Abbas said that government employees in Ramallah would not receive their full salaries this month due to the financial crisis. Less than 2 months ago, Israel transferred $45 million to the PA as a goodwill gesture. Now the Palestinian Authority has sent an official request to Israel to reevaluate the Paris Protocols, the treaty that regulates the economic interaction between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon said that Israel has no reason to further bail out the Palestinians who have taken the unilateral steps against Israel in the United Nations and who have caused the failure of diplomatic relations with Israel.
The IAEA has requested that Iran allow them access without further delay to the Parchin military site. The UN nuclear watchdog believes that Iran tested nuclear weapons at the site, and access to it could provide definitive proof that the Islamic Republic is developing nuclear weapons. Satellite images of the Parchin site shows evidence of a massive cleanup there. Iran claims that the allegation of nuclear weapons testing at Parchin is baseless.
Last week, the State of Israel and the World Jewish Congress hosted its first international conference on justice for Jewish refugees from Arab countries. We reported last week that upon the news of the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, 850,000 Jews living in Arab lands were suddenly forced to flee their homes. These refugees were absorbed into the newly created State of Israel. The purpose of this conference is to bring to light the plight of these refugees and the matter of their compensation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the Arab world has neglected Arab refugees for decades and has used them as a battering ram against Israel, while Israel, who was just born as a nation-state, managed to absorb and resettle the Jewish refugees from Arab countries and turn them into productive citizens. There is a movement in Israel to raise the issue of these Jewish refugees in future peace negotiations. Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon said it is not intended to put obstacles in the way of negotiations. A true peace process must have an historical base of truth in order to survive.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Please stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful day on our rooftop studio. Our guest today is Colonel Moshe Leshem, the president of the Gamla organization. Colonel Leshem, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for taking me over.
Colonel Leshem, you know, there's a lot in the media about a two-state solution, about the peace process, about how we're going to have peace with our neighbors, but it always ends in death, destruction, catastrophe. What is the central flaw in what they call the peace process?
Well, some of our leaders believe that our enemies, the Arabs, are thinking in the same way of thinking and in the same philosophy. And this is the biggest mistake. Because in the Muslims' eyes, we are just a pain in the neck, and this is just to set it moderately. And they don't see us as equal people that have a right to live in our land, in the land of our ancestors, the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Moshe, you are a retired colonel, and you have conservative views on the situation here in Israel. Yet we see a lot of these people coming out of the military now, high up people, even from the Mossad, coming out with very extreme left-wing opinions. What is it about the culture in the military that is pushing the leadership towards a left-leaning solution?
Well, it's a long story, but unfortunately, politics was always part and parcel of our governmental organizations, including the army. And there were times that the army was just like a germination area for left-wingers. And unfortunately, to be promoted, some of our generals think that they should adopt over-moderated, which is more liberal left-wing views. Therefore, the moment they retire, they go back to the roots, which are left-wing roots. And this is sometimes really unfortunate because many of them are very good people, but with very wrong views.
This is interesting because, we have the man for man, the best army in the world, very motivated, very nationalist. So the leadership doesn't really reflect the actual soldiers, if what you're saying is correct.
Well, I'm not a psychologist, but this is something like a dual personality. The moment our army and officers and most of the commanders, the moment they're facing a real threat and they have to fight in the field, they act as wonderful tacticians, very brave leaders, and so forth. The moment those threats, which are actual threats, are removed or suppressed or postponed, they turn to be back those left-wing advocates, and this is the real tragedy.
So the government of Israel today, its position is to bring the Palestinians back to the negotiation table, start negotiating on how we can create a Palestinian state. Do you believe that this is going to work?
Well, we saw it from the beginning, from the infamous Treaty of Oslo, that what the Arabs in this area, whatever they want is just give, and they don't give us anything in return. The organization PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was portrayed as a very moderate organization, actually, if you look at their insignia, the whole state of Israel, from the Jordan Valley to the Dead Sea, is in black color, which means that they don't think and they don't want anything which is called Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. They want actually the whole state of Israel, and they want actually not to see any Jew in this area.
Well, one of the things that is interesting to me is that in 1974, Yasser Arafat, who was the head of the PLO, came out with his phase plan. The phase plan said, phase 1, make a political solution for the PLO. Phase 2, strike Israel from those territories within Israel. And phase 3, turn it into a regional conflict that will end up destroying Israel. It seems that the PLO is implementing this stage by stage. Do you think that the government of Israel is just ignoring this plan, or that they have an optimistic, outlook that maybe things can change and they can bring peace to the region?
Well, it is either over-optimistic or illusionary vision, because the Arabs, the stage by stage, actually was invented in Tunisia by Bourguiba. And they came to a conclusion that they can't win the war in a military field. So they said, let's con them, let's play an act of peace-looking people. And since the Israelis are such peace lovers, we will actually turn them into a nation that they will fight against each other instead of fighting us. And then they will actually lose their real strength and power And maybe one day we will be able to overcome them in the military field. This is their aspiration, actually, all those years.
Moshe, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewers?
Well, the only message that I can, among many others, is that the land of Israel is not a piece of real estate. The land of Israel was given to our ancestors in a very known covenant between Abraham and God. And such a covenant cannot be transferred and transformed into any peace negotiations, which the end of it is giving away land that does not belong to neither government nor people. It belongs to a nation, one of the oldest nations, one of the oldest believers in a one God to a one nation.
Thank you, Colonel Leshem, for being on the show. And thank you for turning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
Here amongst his battalion, nothing stands out about Louis Miller. He's one of hundreds of paratroopers that today will be marching to Jerusalem before graduating into active duty. But a closer look reveals that his story is one of the many stories that form together to make the IDF such a rich and diverse military. Because Louis Miller wasn't required to serve in the IDF, rather, he chose to. And he came all the way from Alabama to be here. Four years earlier, Louis Miller was just another all-American teenager. Having been raised in Alabama before attending college at Indiana University, his life seemed to follow the same trajectory as the millions of other college students in America. But that all changed after he experienced a life-altering trip to Israel through the Birthright program, which provides free trips to young Jewish adults who have never visited Israel. Like so many others, Louis was touched on a deeply personal level by Israel's story of struggle against all odds for an independent Jewish state. And that's when he decided to move to Israel and joined the IDF. Now, years later, Louis is a soldier in the IDF, and after months of intensive training, he is about to embark on a 55-kilometer march as part of his final test as a paratrooper. The march begins at sundown when the soldiers set off.
This has been 4.5 years in the making, actually. Ever since I did Birthright in the winter of '07, I just kind of got this into my head. This is what I wanted to do. And it took a long time to get here. It took a little while, but I'm here. And, like, this is a huge milestone.
Along the route, there are 4 rest stops that serve to rejuvenate the soldiers and allow them something to eat before moving on.
The night went by pretty slowly, but it's been tough. I'm not gonna say it hasn't. It's not as easy as I thought this one was gonna be, to be honest. I'm having a bit of my feet are killing me. I'll say that. I don't know. Everything's pretty good though. Other than that, can't really complain too much. Everyone's feet are hurting, everyone's back's hurting, so we're just gonna get through it. And I guess we'll get to the part with the stretcher soon enough, and that pretty much marks the end. Just gotta keep going.
As the soldiers rear the hills of Jerusalem and enter the city streets, they experience an emotional moment as parents gather to see their children become men. In the final few kilometers, parents seek out their children and are allowed a brief moment to embrace before finally carrying on to the finish line. Later that day, the award ceremony begins, and Lewis Miller is on the lookout for his parents, who flew in from the United States just for this occasion. He hasn't seen them in nearly a year and doesn't know what to expect. But what he could never have expected is the surprise he feels when his name is called out, and he is distinguished with an award in excellence for his performance during the last 6 months of training. Lewis didn't just succeed, he excelled.
Stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy of Jerusalem.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come explore Jerusalem, where Jesus opened blind eyes. Visit the hills of Galilee, where Jesus fed the multitude. Stroll through Capernaum, where Jesus lived and taught and healed. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
You'll never be the same.
From birth onwards, we live our lives in the midst of a battlefield of forces. Our decisions, based on what we think and believe, determine the outcome of this battle. Who are we? Are we a generation that stands for justice and fear God? Are we fulfilling the calling of the sacred scriptures called the Bible? Or are we simply justifying our wrongdoings and turning our eyes from the light of God? How can we get back to the truth? Jesus walked in this desert area where he was tempted by the devil numerous times. In the same way, we are being tempted by the devil every day. He wants to steal our faith, joy, and courage. The question is, are we responding like Jesus? Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. 1 Timothy 4 verse 12. We have heard people say, young people are the future of our church. However, we need to remember, the young people are not just the future of our church. They are an active part of our church right now.
The ICJ Arise Department was established to be a loudspeaker of truth to our generation. If you want to find a true home, that home lays on His Word. God has used a specific piece of land as His vehicle for the world redemptive plan. That piece of land was chosen by God thousands of years ago. That land is called Israel. Today His people is coming back, like the Bible promised us thousands of years ago. This land was given by God, and He promised His people that He will bring them back. That means that we're living among a time of celebration. We're living among a time of miracle. That is something unique that is characterizing this time where we're living. The devil is trying to fight this back because he's trying to prove that God is not working through His word and He's not keeping His promises. Of course, we know that God is mighty and God will always keep His promises. Since its establishment, Arise has brought hundreds of young people to the land of Israel. It's been beautiful to see how God has changed them profoundly in their faith. There's been like an encouragement to their faith, seeing everything physically in this land. We just simply want to tell to the young generation that God loves them and He desperately wants to tell His plans to them. With Arise, we simply want to tell you that God has a special plan for you and for the nation of Israel. He changed me when I visited this land for the first time. Do you want to be the next? Join the Arise movement and make a stand for the kingdom of God.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rom.
And I'm Rebecca Rand, reporting to you from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us next week for all of your Israel updates.